The morning sun cast long shadows across the alien trading post as Hyunwoo Kim stepped off the transport shuttle. The air smelled strange here on Kepler 442c, thick with sulfur and something else he could not name. Behind him, his small team of humans gathered their equipment bags and looked around with wide eyes. Daeun Park wrinkled her nose at the smell. She was the team's scientist, always curious about new places and new creatures. The atmosphere readings were right, she said, checking her tablet. High sulfur content, but breathable for humans. Tae-min Lee, their survival expert, was already scanning the area with sharp eyes. He had been a soldier before joining their expedition. "Looks safe enough," he said quietly, "but stay alert." The trading post was unlike anything they had seen before. Strange buildings made of crystalline materials rose from the ground like frozen lightning. Other structures looked more like giant coral formations, curved and organic. Dozens of different alien species moved between the buildings, conducting business in a dozen different languages. Hyun-woo watched a group of tall, crystal-like beings negotiating with creatures that floated in environmental suits filled with green gas. Further away, massive elephant-like aliens loaded cargo onto floating platforms. This was why they had come so far from Earth, to see these wonders and hopefully do business with these advanced civilizations. "Look at that," Daeun whispered, pointing toward the horizon. Beyond the trading post, the land changed dramatically. What had been solid ground suddenly became a vast expanse of bubbling, steaming marshland. Even from several kilometers away, they could see geysers of scalding water shooting high into the air. The entire swamp seemed to writhe and move like a living thing, covered in a haze of vapor that made everything look ghostly. "The Therma marshlands," said a voice behind them. They turned to see one of the crystal beings approaching. It moved, with strange, tinkling sounds, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The creature was nearly 3 meters tall and seemed to be made of living glass. "I am Krillnox of the Velthani," the being said, its voice somehow coming from deep within its crystalline body. "You are the humans, yes? We received word of your arrival." Hyunwoo stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Yes, I am Hyunwoo Kim. These are my colleagues Daeun Park and Tae-min Lee. We appreciate your welcome." Krillnox's body flickered with different colors, apparently their version of nodding. "You have come far from your homeworld. What brings you to our trading post?" "We seek passage to the lands beyond the marshes," Hyunwoo explained. "Our surveys suggest rich mineral deposits on the far side." The crystal being's colors shifted to what might have been amusement. "Ah, yes. Many seek the treasures beyond the eternal divide, but none may cross the scalding swamp. It has been tried for centuries, by species far more advanced than yours." Daeun looked puzzled. "Eternal divide? What you call the Therma marshlands, we have known for millennia as the eternal divide. It stretches for 800 kilometers in each direction. The waters boil at temperatures that would cook flesh in seconds. The very air above it is poisonous. Underground thermal vents make tunneling impossible." Tae-min squinted toward the distant swamp. "What about flying over it?" Krillnox's colors darkened. "The toxic vapors rise higher than most aircraft can safely fly. The corrosive clouds destroy engines and eat through hull materials. Many have died trying." As if summoned by their conversation, another alien approached. This one was completely different. A large, bulbous creature floating in what looked like a transparent balloon filled with swirling green gas. Tubes and mechanical devices were attached to its form. "Humans!" the creature said, its voice coming through a speaker. "I am Vexthul of the Korthak. We have heard much about your species." "What have you heard?" Daeun asked, genuinely curious. "That you are persistent," Vexthul replied. "But persistence alone will not help you cross the scalding swamp. My People are masters of atmospheric flight. Our bodies are naturally suited to toxic environments. Even we cannot cross safely. More aliens gathered around them now, drawn by curiosity about the humans. Hyunwoo recognized some of the species from their briefing materials. The massive Gorvani looked like elephants crossed with rhinoceros, their thick hides scarred and weathered. Smaller creatures with multiple arms and eyes clustered together, chattering in high-pitched voices. One of the Gorvani, easily 4 meters tall, rumbled forward. "I am Thrumkada. My ancestors were among the first to attempt the crossing 3 centuries ago. 20 of our strongest warriors entered the swamp. None returned." "What exactly makes it so dangerous?" Hyunwoo asked. Krillnox's body brightened, as if excited to share knowledge. The swamp is a thermal region, heated by the planet's core. The water temperature averages 90 degrees Celsius. In some areas, it reaches full boiling point. The mud is acidic enough to dissolve most metals. Geysers erupt without warning, shooting superheated water hundreds of meters into the air. "The ecosystem is also hostile," added Vexthul. "Creatures there have evolved to thrive in conditions that kill everything else. The thermal creche, for example, are crab-like beings with shells that resist both heat and acid. But even they die, eventually leaving their shells scattered throughout the marshes." Dayun perked up at this. "What happens to the shells?" "Nothing," Krillnox replied, colors shifting to show confusion at the question. "They remain where they fall. Useless refuse." Taemin walked closer to the edge of the trading post, looking toward the swamp with tactical eyes. "Has anyone tried building a bridge?" The aliens made various sounds that might have been laughter. Thrumkada's rumble was particularly deep. "With what materials? Small human? The corrosive environment destroys everything. Metal rusts away in hours. Organic materials dissolve even faster. Besides," added Vexthul, "the distance is too great. 800 kilometers of the most hostile environment on this world. No species has technology capable of such a feat." Hyunwoo nodded thoughtfully but said nothing. His team had not come this far to give up at the first obstacle. They had studied the preliminary reports about this world for months, preparing for exactly this kind of challenge. "We would like to examine the swamp ourselves," he said finally, "to see the conditions firsthand." The aliens exchanged glances, or whatever their species did to communicate with each other. Krillnox's colors cycled through several patterns before settling on a dim glow. "You may look, of course, but do not venture close to the waters. Many curious beings have died from the toxic vapors alone." As the day wore on, the humans made their way to the observation platforms at the edge of the swamp. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Steam rose in constant clouds from the bubbling surface. In the distance, they could see geysers, erupting like clockwork, sending pillars of scalding water high into the air. The whole landscape shimmered with heat waves, but Da-Yun was already taking samples and readings. Taemin was studying the terrain with professional interest, and Hyunwoo was thinking, because that was what humans did best. They looked at impossible problems and tried to find solutions that no one else had considered. The aliens had been right about one thing. This was clearly the most dangerous natural barrier any of them had ever seen. But as Hyunwoo watched the sun set over the steaming marshlands, he was already beginning to wonder if there might be another way to look at this problem. 3 days had passed since their arrival, and the humans had established a small camp near the trading post. Hyunwoo sat outside his tent as the alien's sun rose, reviewing the notes his team had gathered. The morning air was still thick with sulfur, but he was getting used to it. Da-Eun emerged from her tent carrying her field equipment. She had spent the previous day collecting samples from the edge of the swamp and was eager to analyze them. "The bacterial life here is incredible," she said excitedly. "Some of these organisms thrive in temperatures that would kill most Earth life instantly." Taemin was already awake, as always. The former soldier had a habit of rising before dawn to scout their surroundings. "The aliens are curious about us," he reported. "I've seen several different species watching our camp from a distance." "Good. Or bad curious?" Hyunwoo asked. "Hard to say. They seem more puzzled than hostile." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sujin Choi, the fourth member of their team. She had been working late into the night, analyzing the geological data they had collected about the far side of the swamp. "I have news," she announced, setting down her heavy equipment case. "The mineral surveys are even better than we hoped. The far side of the swamp contains massive deposits of rare earth elements, more than we've found anywhere else in this sector." Da-Yun looked up from her samples. "What kind of deposits?" "Tritium crystals, processed lithium compounds, and something our scanners can't even identify. If we could establish mining operations there, it would be incredibly valuable." Hyunwoo nodded slowly. This confirmed what they had suspected. Crossing the swamp would be worth almost any risk, but first, they had to figure out how to actually do it. Their discussion was interrupted by the approach of Krillnox, the Veltani they had met on their first day. The crystal being's colors were cycling through patterns they had learned indicated curiosity. "Humans," Krillnox said in its chiming voice. "The Trading Council wishes to speak with you." The Trading Council met in the largest building in the post, a structure that seemed to be grown rather than built. Inside, representatives from 6 different alien species sat around a circular table made of some kind of living coral. Vexthul floated in his environmental suit, green gas swirling around his bulbous form. Thrumkada took up nearly a quarter of the room. His massive Gorvani bulk settled on a platform designed to support his weight. Several other aliens that Hyunwoo had not yet met completed the council. "We have been discussing your species," announced. "A new alien, one that looked like a walking tree with multiple eye stalks. I am Zixalar of the Verdani. We are curious about human intentions regarding the Eternal Divide." Hyunwoo stood to address the council. "We hope to cross the swamp and establish mining operations on the far side. We believe there may be ways to accomplish this that haven't been tried before." The aliens made various sounds that indicated skepticism. Thrumkada's rumble was particularly dismissive. "Humans, your species is new to interstellar travel. We have been exploring the galaxy for millennia. If we cannot cross, what makes you think you can succeed?" "With respect," Hyunwoo replied carefully, "different species have different strengths. Perhaps we can find solutions that others have missed." Vexthul's gas swirled more rapidly. "Your species does show unusual persistence, but persistence without capability is merely stubbornness." "What do you know of our capabilities?" Sujin asked, stepping forward. Krillnox's colors shifted to what might have been amusement. "We know humans are physically weak compared to most spacefaring species. Your technology is primitive by galactic standards. You have no natural resistance to extreme environments. Yet here we are," Taemin said quietly, "traveling between stars despite our limitations." "A fair point," admitted Zixalar, his eye stalks swiveling to focus on Taemin. "How did humans achieve spaceflight with such disadvantages?" Da-Un smiled. "We're very good at using tools, and we're excellent at working together to solve problems." "Tools will not help you in the Scalding swamp," Thrumkada rumbled. "The environment destroys everything. We have tried every material known to galactic science." "Have you tried everything known to human science?" Hyunwoo asked. The question seemed to puzzle the aliens. They exchanged glances and made various communicative sounds. "Human science is a subset of galactic science," Krillnox finally said. "You cannot know things we do not know." "Maybe," Sujin replied, "but we might know different things, or we might think about the same things differently." After the meeting, the humans returned to their camp to find they were no longer alone. Several aliens had gathered nearby, watching them with obvious curiosity. Word was apparently spreading through the trading post about the humans who claimed they could cross the impossible swamp. A group of small, multi-armed aliens approached cautiously. One of them, braver than the others, spoke up in halting Galactic. "Standard. You really try cross-swamp?" it asked. "Yes," Daoun replied gently. "We're going to try. Many species try. All fail. Swamp very dangerous." "We know it's dangerous," Hyunwoo said, "but we think there might be ways to manage the danger." The small alien's multiple eyes blinked in sequence. "How?" "Water too hot. Air too poison. Ground too acid." "We're still working on that," Taemin admitted. More aliens had gathered now, forming a loose circle around the human camp. They seemed fascinated by the idea that anyone would even attempt the crossing. A young Gorvani, smaller than Thrumkada but still massive, pushed forward through the crowd. "My grandfather tried crossing 50 years ago. He had the strongest hide, the most powerful legs. The swamp killed him in the first kilometer." "We're sorry for your loss," Daoun said sincerely. "Why you try if you know you die?" the young Gorvani asked. It was a fair question. Hyunwoo looked around at the gathered aliens, all waiting for his answer. "Because sometimes the impossible is just something nobody has figured out how to do yet," he said finally. "Humans used to think flying was impossible. We used to think traveling to other worlds was impossible. We were wrong about those things." "But this different," protested one of the multi-armed aliens. "This not about building machines. This about surviving place that kill everything?" "Maybe," Sujin said. "Or maybe it's about not fighting the environment, but working with it." The aliens looked confused by this concept. Vex Thul, who had apparently followed them from the council meeting, floated closer. "Explain this working with environment," he demanded. Dae-un pulled out her tablet, showing them some of the data she had collected. "Every environment has its own rules. Instead of trying to overpower those rules, maybe we can learn to use them." "The swamp has been studied for centuries," Krill Knox's voice chimed from nearby. "There are no rules to use, only death." "There are always rules," Hyunwoo said quietly. "Life exists in the swamp, doesn't it? Those thermal creche you mentioned, they've found ways to survive there. They are specially evolved," Thrumkada rumbled. "You cannot become like them." "No," Daoun agreed, "but maybe we can learn from them." As the day wore on, more aliens gathered around the human camp. Some were skeptical, some were curious, and some seemed to think the humans were simply insane. But all of them were interested. Word spread that the small, weak species from a backwater world believed they could accomplish what the greatest civilizations in the galaxy had failed to do. Some aliens began placing bets on how quickly the humans would die if they actually attempted the crossing. But a very few, began to wonder if these strange newcomers might actually have something that others had missed. Daoun crouched at the edge of the swamp, carefully collecting water samples while wearing full protective gear. The heat was intense even through her suit, and the acrid smell of sulfur burned her nose despite the filters. But her scientific curiosity was stronger than her discomfort. "Temperature readings are incredible," she called back to her team. "The water here is averaging 87 degrees Celsius. Some spots are definitely at full boiling point." Hyunwoo watched from a safe distance, studying the landscape through his binoculars. The swamp stretched endlessly before them, a hellish maze of bubbling pools, steaming channels, and sudden geysers. It looked like the surface of an alien planet, which, he reminded himself, it was. "Any signs of life?" he asked. "Actually, yes. The microbial life is extraordinary. And I'm seeing some larger organisms, too." Daeun pointed toward what looked like a cluster of rocks near the shoreline. "Those aren't rocks. They're shells. Massive ones." Taemin moved closer, his soldier instincts keeping him alert for danger. "Shells from what?" "Thermal creche, most likely. The crab-like creatures Vex Thul mentioned." Da-un began walking along the shore, following a trail of the strange shells. Look at this. There are thousands of them. The shells were impressive, each one about the size of a human torso, with a smooth, almost metallic surface that gleamed in the alien sunlight. They were scattered everywhere along the swamp's edge, some half buried in the acidic mud, others stacked in natural piles where the currents had carried them. The aliens called these useless refuse, Hyun-woo said thoughtfully. They might be. Wrong about that, came a new voice. The team turned to see a fifth human approaching, Jun-ho Yoon, their materials scientist. He had arrived on the previous day's transport, bringing specialized equipment to analyze local materials. I've been studying the preliminary samples Da-un sent me, Jun-ho continued, setting down his analysis kit. These shells have some remarkable properties. Such as? Taemin asked. Jun-ho knelt beside one of the larger shells and ran his scanner over its surface. Extremely high heat resistance. They can withstand temperatures well above what we're seeing here. They're also surprisingly buoyant, with a honeycomb internal structure that traps air. Da-un's eyes lit up. That makes sense. The thermal creche would need shells that could protect them from the boiling water and also help them float. There's more, Jun-ho said, his excitement growing. The shell material is naturally resistant to the acidic conditions. And look at this surface texture. It's designed to shed water and vapor efficiently. Hyun-woo picked up one of the smaller shells, hefting its weight. It was much lighter than he had expected, despite its size. How many of these are there? Millions, probably, Da-un replied. The thermal creche have been living and dying in this swamp for who knows how long. Their shells are everywhere. And the aliens just ignore them, Taemin observed. Because to them they're just the remains of dead creatures, Jun-ho said. But to human eyes, they're building materials, Hyun-woo finished. The team stood in silence for a moment, looking out over the thousands of shells scattered along the shore. Around them, the impossible swamp bubbled and steamed, as deadly and impassable as ever. But for the first time since their arrival, Hyun-woo felt a spark of real hope. Their work was interrupted by the approach of Krillnox. The Velthani's crystalline body was pulsing with colors they had learned to associate with curiosity and confusion. Humans, Krillnox chimed. We observe you collecting refuse from the swamp edge. For what purpose? We're studying the materials, Da-un replied honestly. These are dead creature remains, of no value. Jun-ho looked up from his scanner. They might be more valuable than you think. These shells have remarkable properties. Properties? Krillnox's colors shifted rapidly. They are organic waste. What properties could they possess? Heat resistance, buoyancy, acid resistance, structural strength, Jun-ho listed. In human engineering, we call these useful characteristics. The Velthani seemed genuinely puzzled by this concept. You seek to use dead creature parts as tools? Why not? Hyun-woo asked. Your people use crystal formations for building materials. The Korthek use processed gases. Humans have always been good at finding uses for things others overlook. More aliens had begun to gather, drawn by the strange sight of humans collecting what they considered garbage. Vexthul floated over in his environmental suit, his green gas swirling with what might have been amusement. The humans collect refuse, he announced to the growing crowd. Perhaps their primitive status makes them desperate for any materials. Several aliens made sounds that could have been laughter, but Da-un was undeterred. Actually, some of our greatest innovations have come from finding new uses for discarded materials, she said. We call it recycling. Recycling? Krillnox's colors flickered uncertainly. Taking something that seems useless and finding a way to make it useful again, Taemin explained. The concept seemed foreign to the aliens. They watched in bewilderment as the humans continued to examine and collect the shells, measuring them, testing them, and sorting them by size and condition. A young Gorvani pushed through the crowd, the same one who had spoken to them the day before. "What you do with dead shells?" he asked. "We're not sure yet," Hyunwoo admitted, "but they might be part of a solution." "Solution to what?" "To crossing the swamp." The crowd fell silent. Even the constant background chatter of the trading post seemed to die away. The aliens stared at the humans as if they had claimed they could breathe vacuum. "You cannot cross swamp with dead shells," Thrumkata rumbled from somewhere behind the crowd. "Maybe not," Sujin said, emerging from the direction of their camp with her own equipment. "But maybe we can use them to help us cross." The aliens began talking among themselves in their various languages. The sounds ranged from crystalline chiming to gas bubble pops to deep rumbles. It was clear they were debating what the humans might be thinking. Finally, Vexthul spoke for the group. "Explain how refuse could help cross the eternal divide." Hyunwoo looked at his team. They had been thinking about this problem for days, but they weren't ready to reveal their plans yet. Too many details still needed to be worked out. "We're still developing our ideas," he said carefully. "But humans have a saying, one being's trash is another being's treasure." "This makes no sense," Krillnox chimed. "Trash is trash. It has no value because it serves no purpose." "Only if you can't think of a new purpose for it," Da-un replied. The aliens continued to debate among themselves as the humans worked. Some seemed genuinely curious about human methods. Others appeared convinced that the humans were simply too primitive to understand why their ideas wouldn't work. But a few aliens remained silent, watching carefully as the humans systematically examined and cataloged the discarded shells. These observers began to wonder if there might be something to human thinking that they had missed. As the day wore on, the humans filled several containers with shell samples and detailed measurements. They worked with the methodical efficiency that had served their species well throughout history, the same approach that had taken them from stone tools to starships. The aliens watched this organized activity with growing fascination. They had never seen any species work so systematically with what they considered worthless materials. "They treat refuse like valuable resources," one small alien whispered to another. "Perhaps this is why they achieved spaceflight despite their limitations," another replied. By evening, the humans had collected enough data to begin serious planning. As they headed back to their camp, laden with shell samples and scientific equipment, the aliens continued to watch and discuss. For the first time in centuries, beings at the trading post were seriously considering the possibility that someone might actually find a way to cross the Scalding swamp. And the someone they were considering was the species everyone had dismissed as too weak and too primitive to succeed where others had failed. The human camp buzzed with activity as the sun rose over the trading post. Hyunwoo had called a meeting to discuss the plan that had been forming in his mind for the past several days. His team gathered around a makeshift table made from packing crates, their faces serious, but excited. "I think we can do it," Hyunwoo announced without preamble. "I think we can cross the swamp." Junho looked up from his latest test results. "The shell analysis supports it. These thermal crest shells are incredible materials. They're lightweight, heat-resistant, and naturally buoyant." "How buoyant?" Taemin asked. "Enough to support significant weight while floating," Junho replied. "Each large shell could probably support 2 humans plus equipment." Da-un spread out her maps of the swamp, covered with temperature readings and current patterns. "I've been studying the safest route. The water isn't equally dangerous everywhere. There are cooler channels between the worst thermal zones." Sujin joined the discussion. "The distance is still 800 kilometers. Even with the best route, that's an enormous undertaking. Which is why we don't try to cross all at once," Hyunwoo said. "We build a modular causeway, a series of connected platforms that can be assembled piece by piece." The team looked at him with interest. This was the first time he had shared the full scope of his idea. "Think of it as a floating bridge." He continued. We use the shells as pontoons and building materials. We connect them with cables and platforms. We advance across the swamp in stages, building as we go. That would require thousands of shells, Taemin observed, which are just lying around waiting to be collected, Da-Yun pointed out. Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Hae-Rim-Oh, the final member of their team. She had arrived on the morning transport, bringing supplies and logistical expertise from her background in large-scale construction projects. I heard you have an engineering challenge, she said, setting down her bags. Hyunwoo quickly explained their plan. Hai-Rim listened carefully, occasionally asking technical questions about the shells and the swamp conditions. It's ambitious, she said finally, but not impossible. We'd need to organize this like a major construction project. Supply chains, work crews, quality control, safety protocols. Can it be done? Sujin asked. With enough shells, enough rope, and enough careful planning? Yes. Hai-Rim pulled out her tablet and began making notes. We'll need to sort the shells by size and condition, map out assembly stages, calculate weight distribution and stress factors. Word of the humans' activities had spread throughout the trading post. As they worked on their plans, aliens began gathering around their camp in increasing numbers. Some came out of curiosity, others out of skepticism, and a few out of genuine interest in human problem-solving methods. Krillnox arrived first, the Velthani's crystalline body pulsing with rapid color changes that indicated high excitement. We hear rumors of human plans, Krillnox chimed. Is it true you believe you can build a crossing? We're developing a plan, Hyunwoo confirmed. With dead creature shells? Among other things, yes. More aliens arrived, including Vex Thul in his environmental suit and the massive Thrumkata. Soon the humans were surrounded by representatives from a dozen different species, all eager to hear about this supposedly impossible scheme. Explain this plan, Vex Thul demanded, his gas swirling impatiently. Hyunwoo looked at his team, who nodded their agreement. They had developed enough of their concept to share the basic idea. We're going to build a floating causeway, he announced. A series of connected platforms that will allow safe passage across the swamp. The aliens made various sounds of disbelief. Thrumkata's rumble was particularly dismissive. Impossible, the Gorvani declared. No materials can survive the corrosive environment long enough for such construction. These can, Junho said, holding up one of the thermal creche shells. Natural evolution has already solved the materials problem for us. Those are refuse, protested one of the smaller aliens. To you, maybe. To us, they're engineered solutions to the exact problems we face. Hai-Rim began sketching on her tablet, then projected the images for the aliens to see. Each shell becomes a flotation unit. We connect them with flexible cables to form platform sections. The sections connect to form a continuous pathway. The projection showed a chain of floating platforms stretching across the swamp, supported by clusters of shells, and connected by a network of cables and walkways. The cables will dissolve in the acid, Vex Thul objected. Not if they're made from the right materials, Taemin replied. Humans have developed synthetic fibers that are extremely resistant to chemical damage. And you have these materials? With you? Krillnox asked. We can make them. Human chemistry is quite advanced in certain areas. The aliens fell silent, studying the projected plans. The concept was unlike anything they had considered. Instead of trying to overpower the swamp or avoid it entirely, the humans planned to work with its conditions, using materials the swamp itself provided. A new voice joined the discussion. This is insane enough that it might actually work. Everyone turned to see a Velthani they hadn't met before, older than Krillnox, with deeper, more complex color patterns cycling through its crystalline body. I am Velthor, chief engineer of the Velthani colony ship that first surveyed this world. I have studied the Scalding swamp for longer than any being here. The crowd parted respectfully for the elder. Even Thrumkata showed deference to Velthor's experience. "You have found something we missed," Velthor continued, approaching the projected plans. "We saw the shells as biological waste. You see them as construction materials. Different perspectives lead to different solutions." Da-un said, "Indeed, and your modular approach is clever. Instead of trying to build the entire crossing at once, you advance in stages, testing each section before proceeding." "Exactly," Hyunwoo confirmed. "If a section fails, we can retreat and modify our approach." Velthor's colors shifted to what the humans had learned indicated deep thought. "The engineering challenges are significant. Stress calculations, thermal expansion, current resistance, platform stability in varying conditions. We've considered those factors," Hiram assured him. "The beauty of using the shells is that they are already designed for these conditions." "But can you manufacture sufficient connecting materials?" Velthor asked. "That's our next challenge," admitted Junho. "We need to produce cables and fasteners that can handle the chemical environment." "We have chemical processing equipment in our ship," Sujin offered. "It's designed for extracting and refining materials in hostile environments." The discussion continued for hours as the humans explained their approach and the aliens asked increasingly technical questions. Some aliens remained skeptical, but others began to see the logic in human methods. "They think differently than we do," one small alien whispered to another. "They see possibilities where we see only obstacles," another replied. As the day ended, the aliens dispersed to their various quarters and businesses, but the talk throughout the trading post was of the human plan. Some dismissed it as fantasy, but others began to wonder if these newcomers might achieve something that had been considered impossible for centuries. The humans worked late into the night, refining their calculations and preparing for the massive undertaking ahead. They knew the plan was ambitious to the point of seeming impossible, but they also knew that humans had a long history of achieving the impossible through careful planning, hard work, and the willingness to see solutions where others saw only problems. The construction began at dawn, 3 weeks after the humans had first announced their plan. What started as a small human operation had grown into something much larger as aliens volunteered to help with various aspects of the project. Hiram stood on a platform overlooking the organized chaos of the work site. Hundreds of thermal crest shells had been sorted into categories based on size, condition, and buoyancy. Aliens from 6 different species worked alongside humans, each contributing their unique abilities to the massive undertaking. Section 1 is ready for water trials, called Wu Jin Kang, the newest member of their team. He had arrived 2 weeks earlier with expertise in rope and cable systems. The binding techniques he developed used a combination of human synthetic, chemistry, and materials science that the aliens found fascinating. "How are the connections holding up?" Hiram asked. "Better than expected. The new cable design is working perfectly." Wu Jin held up a sample of their latest innovation, cables, woven from synthetic fibers that became stronger when exposed to acidic conditions. "The swamp environment actually improves the material properties." Da-un emerged from the water wearing full protective gear, her face flushed with excitement despite the heat. "The test section is stable. No shell degradation after 6 hours in the water. The platform design distributes weight evenly." Around them, the work continued with remarkable efficiency. The humans had organized the construction like a factory assembly line, with each step carefully planned and executed. Shells were cleaned, inspected, and prepared at one station. At another, cables were measured and attached. A third station handled quality control, ensuring every component met their safety standards. The aliens had initially watched this systematic approach with puzzlement, but now they participated with growing enthusiasm. The Gorvani used their massive strength to move heavy shell clusters. The multi-armed Vekani proved excellent at detailed assembly work. Even the Velthani contributed, using their crystalline bodies to test electrical conductivity in the cable systems. Humans work like colony insects, Thrumkata observed, but his tone was admiring rather than critical. Every individual knows their role and performs it efficiently. We call it teamwork, Taemin replied, directing a group of aliens in moving. A completed platform section toward the water. Humans learned long ago that we accomplish more working together than working alone. Yejin Nam, their navigator, called out from her position near the water's edge. Weather conditions are optimal for the first extended test. Thermal activity is at minimum levels for the next 6 hours. The first real test of their system was about to begin. A completed section of the causeway, 50 meters of interconnected platforms supported by thermal crest shells, would be deployed into the actual swamp conditions. All teams ready? Hyun-woo called. Confirmations came from around the work site, in multiple languages. Humans, Velthani, Gorvani, Korthak, and others had all found roles in this unprecedented project. Deploy Section 1. The massive platform section slid into the bubbling water with a splash that sent steam rising around it. For a moment, everyone held their breath as the causeway settled into the hostile environment. It floated. Cheers erupted from the assembled workers. The shells bobbed gently in the scalding water, supporting the platform weight exactly as the calculations had predicted. The cables held firm, the connections remained secure, and the entire section rode the thermal currents with stable grace. Stress. Readings are all within normal parameters, Junho reported from his monitoring station. Temperature resistance is holding. Chemical resistance is perfect. How is this possible? Velthor asked, his ancient crystal form pulsing with amazement. We have tried for centuries with our most advanced materials. Because you were fighting the environment, Daun explained. We're working with it instead. Over the following days, the construction accelerated. More aliens volunteered to help as word spread that the impossible project was actually working. The humans had created something that no one had seen before, a truly collaborative effort between multiple species, all working toward a common goal. Krill Nox had become one of their most enthusiastic supporters, using the Velthani ability to communicate across long distances to coordinate work teams. This project changes how we think about cooperation between species, the crystal being had told them. The work was not without challenges. Sudden thermal storms tested their platform designs, forcing modifications to handle unexpected stresses. Chemical reactions between different alien technologies required careful engineering solutions. And the sheer scale of the project, 800 kilometers of causeway, seemed overwhelming at times. But the humans approached each problem with the same systematic methodology that had brought them from stone tools to starships. They analyzed failures, modified designs, tested solutions, and gradually improved their system. The humans teach us new ways of thinking, Vexthul observed to a group of Korthak engineers. They see problems as puzzles to be solved, not barriers to be avoided. The most significant breakthrough came when Yejin discovered that the swamp's thermal currents followed predictable patterns. By positioning their platforms to take advantage of these currents, they could actually use the swamp's energy to help move supplies and equipment. The swamp is helping us cross it, she announced excitedly during a planning meeting. The thermal flows can carry loaded platforms along our route. This discovery transformed their construction timeline. Instead of fighting against the hostile environment, they were learning to dance with it, using its own forces to aid their progress. More aliens arrived daily, drawn by curiosity about the project that was challenging everything they thought. They knew about the impossible swamp. Some came to help, others to observe, and a few to place bets on whether the humans would actually succeed. Never seen anything like this, admitted a veteran trader who had worked the post for 40 years. These humans make the impossible seem routine. As section after section of the causeway took shape, extending further into the swamp, the aliens began to realize they were witnessing something historic. Not just the potential crossing of the Scalding swamp, but the emergence of a new kind of interspecies cooperation. They share their knowledge freely, observed Zixalar of the Verdani. Most species guard their innovations jealously, but humans teach anyone who wants to learn. This openness had practical benefits. Alien innovations began improving human designs. Velthani crystal technology enhanced their navigation systems. Korthak atmospheric expertise improved their safety protocols. Gorvani strength techniques made construction faster and safer. The project was becoming something larger than anyone had imagined. Not just a human achievement, but a collaborative triumph that combined the best abilities of multiple species. The first month of construction ended. Nearly 200 kilometers of causeway stretched into the swamp. The humans had proven their concept worked, but the greatest challenges still lay ahead. "We're committed now," Hyunwoo said, looking out over their achievement. "No turning back." "Would you want to turn back?" asked Sujin. Hyunwoo smiled. "Not for anything. This is what humans do best, the impossible made routine through hard work and determination." 2 months of construction had led to this moment. The causeway stretched for 800 kilometers across the Scalding swamp, a remarkable feat of engineering and cooperation, but no one had actually tried to cross the entire distance yet. Hyunwoo stood at the beginning of their floating pathway, checking his equipment one final time. The crossing team was small, just 5 humans and 2 alien volunteers who had insisted on joining the historic journey. "All safety systems are functional," Taemin reported, his military experience showing in his careful preparation. "Emergency. Shelters are positioned every 50 kilometers. Rescue boats are on standby." Dayun was reviewing the environmental data on her tablet. Thermal activity is at seasonal minimum levels. Weather patterns look stable for the next 3 days. If we're going to do this, now is the optimal time. The entire trading post had turned out to watch the departure. Hundreds of aliens lined the shore, many of the same beings who had initially dismissed the human plan as impossible. Now they watched with a mixture of excitement and concern as the small team prepared to attempt what no one had done in recorded history. "Are you certain about this?" Velthor asked, the ancient Velthani's crystal form pulsing with worry. "The causeway has been tested in sections, but a full crossing has risks." "Yes," Hyunwoo acknowledged. "But everything worthwhile has risks, and we've prepared as thoroughly as we can." Krillnox approached, carrying what looked like a crystalline recording device. "If you succeed, this moment should be documented for future generations." "When we succeed," corrected Sujin with a confident smile. The 2 alien volunteers were an unlikely pair. Kreshtal was a young Korthak scientist, eager to experience human problem-solving methods firsthand. Grumlak was an elderly Gorvani trader who claimed he wanted to see the far side of the swamp before he died. "Why do you want to come with us?" Da-Un had asked them during the planning phase. "Because you have shown us that impossible things can become possible," Kreshtal had replied. "We wish to learn how humans think when facing the impossible," the Kai. Crossing began at dawn. The team moved carefully along the causeway, testing each section before committing their full weight. The floating platforms swayed gently under their feet, but held firm against the thermal currents below. "Platform stability is excellent," Woojin reported after the first kilometer. "The shell-based flotation system is performing exactly as calculated." The swamp around them was both beautiful and terrifying. Steam rose in constant clouds from the bubbling water. Geysers erupted in the distance, sending pillars of scalding water hundreds of meters into the air. The alien landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by their narrow pathway. "Temperature readings?" Hyunwoo asked. "Water temperature is averaging 89 degrees Celsius, Da-Yun replied. "Air temperature is 43 degrees, well within our safety margins." The first major challenge came at kilometer 15. A section of the causeway had been damaged by a thermal storm the previous week. The repair work had been completed, but this was the first real test of their emergency procedures. Platform integrity is at 70%, Junho called from his diagnostic equipment. Still safe, but we should move quickly. The team crossed the damaged section without incident, but the experience reminded them that they were traveling through one of the most hostile environments any of them had ever encountered. Your species has remarkable courage, Grumlack rumbled as they continued. Most beings would turn back after seeing such damage. Courage is just fear that has said its prayers and decided to keep going anyway, Taemin replied with a grin. By midday, they had covered nearly 100 kilometers. The causeway stretched ahead of them like a thread across the steaming wilderness. Behind them, the trading post had disappeared into the haze. We're committed now, Yejin observed. Too far to turn back easily. Were you planning to turn back? Asked Kreshtal, his environmental suit allowing him to float alongside them. Never seriously considered it, admitted Hyunwoo. Humans are stubborn that way. The afternoon brought new challenges. Toxic vapor clouds forced them to don full protective gear for several hours. Shifting thermal currents caused some platform sections to drift slightly out of alignment, requiring careful navigation. And the psychological pressure of being surrounded by hundreds of kilometers of deadly swamp began to affect even the most experienced team members. The isolation is intense, Da-un noted during a rest break. It's easy to feel very small and vulnerable out here. That's why humans travel in groups, Taemin replied. We're social creatures. We do better when we support each other. The alien volunteers seemed fascinated by human group dynamics. They observed how the team members took turns leading, how decisions were made collectively, and how morale was maintained through humor and encouragement. Your species shares burdens in ways we do not, Grumlock observed. When one weakens, others compensate. It's how we survived long enough to reach the stars, Sujin explained. The most dangerous moment came at kilometer 312. A massive geyser erupted without warning just 20 meters from their position. Scalding water and steam engulfed the causeway, testing every safety system they had installed. Emergency shelter! Now! Taemin shouted. The team dove into one of the reinforced shelters they had positioned along the route. For 10 minutes, they huddled inside while superheated water rained down around them. Causeway integrity? Hyunwoo asked when the eruption subsided. Junho checked his instruments. Some minor damage to the platform edges, but the main structure held. The thermal crest shells really are incredible materials. We can continue? Asked Kreshtal. We can continue, Hyunwoo confirmed. The aliens watched in amazement as the humans calmly assessed the damage, made necessary repairs, and continued their journey as if surviving a scalding geyser was just another minor inconvenience. How do you remain so calm in the face of such danger? Grumlack asked. Practice, Da-un replied, and the knowledge that we've prepared for these possibilities. As the sun set on their first day, they had covered 400 kilometers, halfway, across the impossible swamp. They set up camp on a reinforced platform section, protected by emergency shelters and surrounded by the alien wilderness. Tomorrow we reach the far side, Yejin announced after checking their position. How does it feel to be making history? Asked Kreshtal. The humans looked at each other and shrugged almost in unison. Like work, Taemin said finally. Hard work, dangerous work, but still just work. That is very human, observed Grumlock, with what might have been amusement. As they settled down for the night, protected by their technology and surrounded by one of the most hostile environments in known space, the team reflected on how far they had come. Behind them lay 400 kilometers of proven causeway. Ahead lay 400 more kilometers and the completion of something that had been considered impossible for centuries. We're actually going to do this, Sujin said quietly. Did you ever doubt it? Asked Hyunwoo. Every day since we started, she admitted. "But that's normal for humans, isn't it? We do impossible things while being terrified they won't work." "It's what makes us human," Daun agreed. The alien volunteers listened to this exchange with growing understanding of what made humans unique among the spacefaring species. It wasn't their technology or their physical abilities. It was their willingness to attempt the impossible while fully aware of all the reasons it shouldn't work. The morning of the second day dawned clear and unusually calm. The thermal activity in the swamp seemed to have settled into a peaceful rhythm, as if the hostile environment itself was cooperating with the historic crossing attempt. Hyunwoo stood at the edge of their overnight platform, looking ahead toward their destination. In the distance, barely visible through the morning haze, he could see the far shore of the Scalding swamp. After 800 kilometers of seemingly endless hostile terrain, the end was finally in sight. 4 hours, Yejin announced after checking their position and calculating the remaining distance. 4 hours and we'll have crossed the eternal divide. The team prepared for the final leg of their journey with careful attention to detail. After coming this far, no one wanted to make a mistake that could endanger the success of their mission. "All systems are functioning normally," Junho reported after completing his equipment checks. "The causeway shows minimal wear despite everything we've put it through." "The shells are remarkable," Daun observed. "Even after 2 days of constant use in these conditions, they show no signs of degradation." Kreshtal floated nearby in his environmental suit, his excitement visible even through the mechanical systems that kept him alive. "My people will not believe this when I tell them. A species crossing the Scalding swamp using materials we considered worthless refuse. Your people will believe it when we bring them across to see for themselves," Grumlach rumbled. The elderly Gorvani had proven to be an excellent traveling companion, his calm demeanor helping to steady the team during difficult moments. The final approach was almost anticlimactic. The causeway stretched ahead of them, as stable and reliable as it had been throughout the journey. The thermal activity remained calm. The weather cooperated. After all their preparation for disasters and emergencies, the crossing ended with simple, steady progress across the floating pathway. "There," Sujin pointed ahead. "Solid ground." The far shore was visible now, a rocky beach backed by hills that showed no signs of the thermal activity that made the swamp so deadly. It looked peaceful, almost ordinary after the alien landscape they had been traversing. "Final kilometer," Taemin announced. As they approached the shore, the team could see figures waiting for them. The news of their crossing attempt had been transmitted ahead by Korthak communication systems, and a crowd had gathered to witness their arrival. "More aliens than I expected," Wu Jin observed. "Word travels fast in the trading networks," explained Grumlach. "This crossing will be discussed on 100 worlds within days." The final meters seemed to take forever. Then suddenly they were stepping off the causeway onto solid ground for the first time in 2 days. The rocky shore felt incredibly stable after the gentle swaying of the floating platforms. A cheer went up from the waiting crowd. Dozens of aliens from species the humans had never seen before had gathered to witness this historic moment. Among them were familiar faces. Velthor had somehow arranged transportation to the far shore, and even Thrumkata was present, having made the journey by a route that took weeks instead of days. "You have achieved the impossible," Velthor announced, his ancient crystal form pulsing with colors that conveyed profound respect. "In 8 centuries of galactic civilization, no one has successfully crossed the eternal divide." "We had good materials to work with," Hyunwoo replied modestly, gesturing toward the shells that had made their causeway possible. "Materials that we dismissed as worthless," admitted a new voice. The speaker was unlike any alien the humans had encountered before, tall and elegant, with features that seemed to shift between solid and energy states. Other aliens moved aside respectfully as the being approached. "I am Zarthek of the Eternal Council," the being announced. We govern trade and exploration in this sector of the galaxy. Your achievement has drawn our attention. Dione stepped forward. Our achievement belongs to everyone who helped build the causeway. This was a cooperative effort between multiple species. Indeed. And that cooperation is perhaps more remarkable than the crossing itself. Zarthek's form shimmered as if reflecting deep thought. You have demonstrated something we believed impossible. True collaboration between species with vastly different capabilities and perspectives. The celebration continued as Minho Seo arrived from the trading post. The human diplomat had crossed the causeway behind them, leading a group of traders eager to establish commerce with the previously unreachable settlements on the far shore. The economic implications are staggering, Minho announced. This crossing opens up trade routes that have been blocked for centuries. Both sides of the swamp have resources the other needs. And you're sharing this achievement with everyone, observed a Korthak trader. Most species would claim exclusive rights to such a valuable route. Humans believe in mutual benefit, Sujin explained. We succeed best when everyone succeeds. This attitude seemed to perplex many of the aliens who were accustomed to species that guarded their advantages jealously. The idea of freely sharing such a valuable innovation was almost as remarkable to them as the crossing itself. Why? Asked a small, multi-eyed trader. Why give away something so valuable? Taemin shrugged. Because we're stronger when we work together than when we work alone. This crossing proves that. Over the following days, the implications of the successful crossing became clear. Trade between the two sides of the swamp resumed for the first time in living memory. Scientific expeditions began studying the swamp ecosystem with new interest, and most importantly, different alien species began working together on other impossible projects, inspired by the human example. You have changed. More than transportation routes, Velthor told Yunwu during a planning meeting. You have changed how species think about cooperation. The causeway itself became a symbol of what could be achieved through collaboration. Regular maintenance crews composed of multiple species worked together to keep the pathway safe and functional. Improvements and expansions were planned jointly, with each species contributing their unique abilities. The humans have taught us that there are no worthless materials, Krilnox observed to a gathering of Velthani engineers. Only materials for which we have not yet found the right application. This new perspective began spreading throughout the galactic community. Projects that had been considered impossible were revisited with fresh eyes. Resources that had been dismissed as valueless were re-examined. And most importantly, species that had rarely cooperated began working together on ambitious new undertakings. We underestimated them, admitted Thrumkada to a gathering of Gorvani leaders. We saw weak bodies and primitive technology. We failed to see innovative minds and collaborative spirits. The human team found themselves in demand as consultants and advisors, helping other species tackle challenges that had seemed insurmountable. But they approached each new project with the same methodical, collaborative approach that had made the swamp crossing possible. Every impossible problem is just a puzzle we haven't solved yet, became Hyunwoo's standard response when asked about human problem-solving methods. As the celebration continued and plans were made for expanded cooperation between species, the humans reflected on what they had accomplished. They had set out to cross a swamp and establish mining operations. Instead, they had demonstrated something much more valuable, that different species could work together to achieve things none could accomplish alone. Not bad for a species, everyone. Thought was too primitive to matter, Diane observed with satisfaction. Just goes to show, replied Taemin, never underestimate the power of human stubbornness combined with alien cooperation. The impossible had become routine, exactly as humans had been doing throughout their history. 6 months had passed since the first successful crossing of the Scalding swamp, and the transformation of the region was remarkable. What had once been a barrier dividing two isolated sides of the continent had become the busiest trade route in the sector. Hyun-woo stood on the observation deck of the new administration complex, watching the constant flow of traffic across the causeway. Alien vessels of every size and description moved along the floating pathway, carrying goods, passengers, and ideas between communities that had been separated for centuries. Daily traffic is up to 3,000 crossings, reported Ji-hoon, Lim, who had arrived 2 months earlier to establish the crossing management system. We're processing more trade in a week than this region used to see in a year. The success had attracted attention from across the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species had come to study the causeway and learn about human engineering methods. More importantly, they came to understand the collaborative approach that had made the project possible. The Andromedans want to hire us for a similar project, Da-un announced, reading from her communications tablet. They have a toxic desert that's blocked expansion on 3 of their colony worlds. And the Centauri Coalition has asked us to consult on their asteroid mining problems, added Soo-jin. Apparently, they've been thinking about resources all wrong. Hyun-woo smiled at the familiar pattern. Once aliens began adopting human perspectives on problem-solving, they started seeing solutions everywhere. The key insight was simple but powerful. Instead of fighting against difficult conditions, work with them. Instead of discarding materials that seemed useless, find new applications for them. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Velthor, the ancient Velthani engineer who had become one of their closest alien collaborators. His crystalline form pulsed with the rapid color changes they had learned to associate with excitement. The Eternal Council has made a decision, Velthor announced. They are establishing the Institute for Collaborative Engineering with facilities on 12 worlds. They want humans to lead the program. What exactly would this institute do? Asked Tae-min, who had been overseeing the security aspects of the causeway operation. Teach other species to think like humans, Velthor replied. To see opportunities instead of obstacles. To value cooperation over competition. The idea was ambitious, but then again, so had been crossing the swamp, and the results spoke for themselves. In the 6 months since the causeway opened, 17 different impossible projects had been completed using similar collaborative approaches. The Korthak had developed atmospheric processing techniques that made previously uninhabitable worlds livable. The Gorvani had created new construction methods that allowed building on unstable terrain. The Velthani had revolutionized communication networks by combining their crystal technology with human organizational principles. It's spreading, observed Hi-Rim, who had been documenting the various projects inspired by their success. The collaborative approach is being adopted throughout this sector of the galaxy. The causeway itself had evolved far beyond their original design. What started as a simple floating bridge had become a complex transportation network with rest stations, emergency facilities, maintenance depots, and even small communities built on reinforced platforms. The thermal crush shells are still holding up perfectly, Jun-ho reported from his daily inspection rounds. In fact, they seem to be getting stronger with age. Exposure to the swamp conditions appears to improve their structural integrity. This discovery had led to a new industry, thermal crush shell harvesting and processing. What had been considered worthless refuse was now one of the most valuable construction materials in the galaxy. Entire communities of shell collectors had sprung up around the swamp, providing employment for beings from dozens of species. The economic impact has exceeded all projections, Min-ho said during their weekly planning meeting. This single crossing has generated more wealth in 6 months than most star systems produce in years. But the economic benefits, impressive as they were, paled beside the social changes. For the first time in galactic history, multiple species were working together as true partners rather than competitors or reluctant allies. The children are most remarkable, noted Ye-jin, who had been studying the cultural impacts of the project. Young beings from different species play together on the causeway platforms, learning each other's languages and customs naturally. This was perhaps the most significant long-term impact. A new generation was growing up with the expectation that different species would work together, share knowledge, and support each other's success. Krill Knox had become a regular visitor, bringing groups of young Velthani to see the causeway and learn about human problem-solving methods. Our youth ask different questions now, the crystal being explained. Instead of asking why something cannot be done, they ask how it might be accomplished. The transformation extended far beyond the immediate region. News of the collaborative success had spread through interstellar communication networks, inspiring similar projects throughout the galaxy. The human approach, seeing opportunities instead of obstacles, valuing cooperation over competition, finding uses for discarded resources, was being adopted by civilizations that had never encountered humans directly. "We've created something bigger than a crossing," Wu Jin observed. "We've created a new way of thinking about galactic civilization." The humans found themselves in the unusual position of being teachers rather than students. Delegations from advanced civilizations sought their advice on projects that had stalled for decades. Ancient species that had considered humans too primitive to notice were now eager to learn human methods. "It's humbling," admitted Da-Un during one of their team meetings. "We came here to mine minerals. Instead, we've helped reshape how species interact with each other." The mining operation had been successful too, of course. The rare earth deposits on the far side of the swamp were even richer than their initial surveys had suggested, but the mineral wealth seemed almost secondary to the social revolution they had inadvertently triggered. Grumlock, the elderly Gorvani, who had joined their historic first crossing, had become something of a celebrity in his own right. His account of the human approach to impossible problems had been translated into dozens of languages and was studied in schools throughout Gorvani. Space. "Humans do not see barriers," he would tell audiences. "They see puzzles waiting to be solved." As their first year at the trading post approached, the human team reflected on what they had accomplished. They had set out to find a way across an impassable swamp. Instead, they had demonstrated that there were no truly impassable barriers. Only barriers that hadn't been approached with the right combination of creativity, persistence, and cooperation. "The Velthani have updated their historical records," Velthor announced during one of his visits. "The Eternal Divide is no longer called eternal. They now refer to it as the Great Bridge." "That has a nice ring to it," Hyun-woo agreed. They also added a new saying to their cultural database. "What seems impossible to one mind becomes possible to many minds working together." The causeway stretched out before them as they talked, busy with traffic even in the evening hours. Lights from the platforms created a glowing path across the dark swamp, transforming what had once been a barrier into a beacon of cooperation and possibility. "So what's next?" asked Sujin. Hyun-woo looked at his team, the humans who had made the impossible routine through careful planning, hard work, and an unshakable belief that problems existed to be solved. Around them, aliens from a dozen species worked together, maintaining and improving the system they had all built together. "There are still plenty of impossible things that need to become possible," he said with a smile. "Good thing humans specialize in exactly that." The Great Bridge stretched across the former Eternal Divide, proof that with the right perspective, the right materials, and the right cooperation, there truly were no barriers that couldn't be overcome. It had taken humans to show the galaxy that sometimes the best solutions came from seeing value where others saw only worthless refuse, and finding possibilities where others saw only problems. The impossible had become routine. And throughout the galaxy, other species were learning to make it routine too.